Friends, so I was tossing up whether to do a little commentary about the Democratic debates, the June 26th, June 27th, 2019 debates. So I thought I might just do a very quick thing about it, since really it's just a circus. You know, it's just a circus that's come to town twice, and it's just sort of for want of something better, a dog and pony show, really. It's all just pretense. But anyway, so the first debate had Cory Booker, Julian Castro, Bill de Blasio, I don't know what that man's name is, Delaney, Tulsi Gabbard, Inslee, Klobuchar, O'Rourke, it's Beto O'Rourke, Ryan, and Elizabeth Warren. And on the second night, that was, today at my time, 11 o'clock my time in Tasmania, it was Bennet, Biden, Buttigieg, Gillibrand, Harris, Hickenlooper, Sanders, Swalwell, Williamson, and Yang. Okay, so those the first debate. I'm just going to give you one impression I got from one of the questions, which was asking them what they thought was the greatest threat to U.S. national security. Now, if I was one of those candidates, which wouldn't get anywhere if I said this, but if I was one of those candidates, I would have said the U.S. national security state is the greatest threat to U.S. national security. And that would have been my answer. And unfortunately, nobody really on the first night said anything about the U.S. being any sort of problem, except for Tulsi Gabbard, who is openly anti-imperialist, anti-interventionist. Well, I'm not sure entirely if she's. She says she's anti-interventionist, and I'm not going to go into my thoughts about what I think about her in relation to Israel, and what I think of her in relation to her positions on using drones. I'm just going to. You can look back at my past posts about that. I've done 2 posts about Tulsi Gabbard, one on her position on Israel, and the other one was my thoughts about her positions on drones and all of that. So, but she was the only one really that said anything like that was sort of, that the wars were problematic, and all the others didn't. So anyway, all the others actually answered the question by, it was almost like they'd been given their talking points by the Democratic Party, and most of them said China is the greatest threat. Now, you would think that the climate emergency is the greatest threat, apart from U.S. imperialism that can lead to nuclear war, and that's what Tulsi Gabbard said, nuclear war was the greatest threat. Climate change, the climate emergency is the greatest threat, because we're staring at imminent human extinction, and I've done numerous videos on that. You can check them out on this site, Faint Signals from Vega. So anyway, all of them pretty much said China, and I think it was Bill de Blasio said Russia. So it's almost like they got their talking points from the Democratic Party, and they were told to say China, because like China is an economic threat. So to them, that's what they see. The U.S. sees China as an economic threat. Apparently capitalism is okay until somebody is doing better than you are, and then it's not okay. And then you've got to destroy that competitor. I mean, literally, because they're looking at some point at some sort of war on China, literally a military war on China. That when they all said that, and anybody who said Russia, for me, that sort of tells you exactly where those people are and how easily they are manipulated by the national security state and by the military-industrial complex, because you know that at some point, because they won't be able to stop China from growing economically. I mean, they're a real major economic power now, and overtaking the United States, and also the United States is so busy trying to sanction everybody who does business with Russia or does business with Venezuela, or who does business with Iran, and so forth. They're so busy threatening everybody that everybody is starting to coalesce around China, and China is smart enough to be making all sorts of deals. And there's imperialism under there, of course, I don't believe China, there isn't some sort of imperialist goal in there somewhere too. But China is doing many deals with all sorts of countries, is also making big alliances with Russia because they know that the United States is after Russia and China and wants to destroy them literally. And, so it's in their best interest to all band together. And I've spoken about that before in this, my various talks. And by the way, I'm no journalist. I'm just somebody who is anti-imperialist and anti-war, and is also vegan. And I reject forms of discrimination. So I talk about that too. So that's where my interest lies in sort of. I have a big problem with any candidate who is not completely anti-imperialist and anti-war. And I do believe that if you are that, seriously, you will never, ever get through the primary of the Democratic Party because they're completely pro-war, completely owned by corporations. It would be a miracle if you actually got through the primary. And they, of course, stole the primary from Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders did not challenge them. And we don't know what he will do this time. Bernie Sanders, by the way, has a spotted past about imperialism, and he was a big Russiagator and even did videos, anti-Russian propaganda videos. This is Bernie Sanders. So, he has a lot of problems. He's called, Maduro a dictator. He's called Chavez a dictator. All sorts of things like that. Basically anybody who isn't under the thumb of the US, he at some point has called a dictator. So anyway, but I'm not going to get into that about Bernie Sanders. You can find some videos that I've done about him. But, he probably, as far as domestic policy goes, he has the best domestic policy. He's for Medicare for all and all that kind of thing. And, of course, that is something that Joe Biden is absolutely not for at all. He's a completely right-wing, anti-choice candidate. And if he gets through, it just shows that, that the Democratic Party is once again rigged the thing because, well, I'll just talk about today. So that first debate, I'll say that they all showed their true colors when they all said things like China. They've been given the national security talking points about being against China, and China is thrashing them economically, and that's a big no-no, and so China must be destroyed. So that tells you everything you need to know about all those candidates except for Tulsi Gabbard. And that includes Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren is a imperialist. They're all imperialists. And they can all be manipulated and instructed what to do. So you know what's going to happen when any of those candidates if they got into office, they will have the national security state and the CIA and all of that dictating to them who they need to be against, who they need to go after, and so forth. I have to say that it's quite incredible with that first debate. That one of the first things that the moderator tried to do was to smear Tulsi Gabbard by raising her past in relation to her anti-LGBT stance, which she has said she has since rejected. But that's the first thing they did was smear her in front of the audience, and so that tells you a lot about the Democratic debates. That the people who are actually anti-war and really supposedly want free healthcare and all that kind of thing, they want to throw them under the bus anytime they can. And even though apparently Tulsi Gabbard was the most Googled, they said, I don't use Google, but Googled candidate during those debates and after, and so obviously a lot of people were interested in her. She didn't even get a mention. This isn't surprising, but on, say, for example, the Young Turks, it likes to tout itself as a sort of progressive kind of a outlet. They just didn't even mention her. I mean, it's truly amazing. I don't know why people support the Young Turks. I found they're just big Russiagators, promoting for all they're worth the whole Russiagate nonsense. Anyway, there you go. So, and of course, they just ignored Tulsi Gabbard, and they basically tried to ignore her during the debates. they had all these interchanges between Castro and Booker. They had these interchanges between Castro and Booker. Beto O'Rourke was trying to impress everybody with some Spanish, even people that were Spanish in the audience. Even people who spoke Spanish in the audience apparently were rolling their eyes. I certainly made my eyes roll. Then Cory Booker, I think, had looked at him as if, damn it, you got in first. I was going to break into Spanish. I mean, this is the sort of nonsense. This is the exploitation of identity politics. People sort of, exploiting it basically, and sort of like trying to pretend to be friends of different groups as well. Trying to appeal to Latino voters, and knowing that they're one of the fastest growing voter groups. It's sort of disgusting to see. And so anyway, that's all I'm going to say about the debate number one. That just the way they uniformly talked about China, I just thought, wow, they're all bought. They'll be easily manipulated. And basically it's almost like they've clocked in at they've said, yes, I'm a member of the imperialist club in the Democratic Party. Here's my credentials. Now let me through. Give me a chance at being president, because I've proven that I am an imperialist and that I'm easily that I will do your bidding, national security state. That's what that says to me, Warren and all those people. So, Tulsi Gabbard stuck out like a sore thumb there. That must have been fun for her. And they did their best to try and ignore her in that Democratic debate. And they've done their best to ignore her after the debate too. So she's very composed, I have to say. I found it frustrating just watching how they did their best to pretend she wasn't there. And she was wearing red. She was probably the only one that stuck out and she probably knew they were going to ignore her too. It's funny. So that's probably why she wore red. Anyway, so the second one on June 27th, 2019. So this was I don't even think they touched on U.S. imperialism. See, this is how normalized war is for that party. It's like a baseline that you don't question. You really, not supposed to question it. And I love the way in the first debate they actually frame questions with this assumption that say China. What are you going to do about China? Like that question, what on earth does that mean? What are you going to do about China? You're going to overlook the climate emergency because China is so important, because China is whooping your ass in economically. I mean, it's truly astounding. Like, what are we going to do about China? Like this arrogance. And that was a question they asked in that first debate. What are we going to do about China? Anyway, I think that was a question they asked. But like you could see that they're lining China up as this evil sort of country. Anyway, so anyway, back to this Democratic debate number two. What was amusing to me, and of course it was all over the place like a dog's breakfast. And I find the questions, they're always so loaded, and they're just not really. They're loaded, and they sort of direct people in certain ways and give them ways out. But interestingly, the one that obviously the Democratic Party did want up until this debate, because Kamala Harris really whooped him. Joe Biden clearly is not for free healthcare. He's clearly not for free public education. He is clearly an imperialist. He is he's just basically, he's more right than right wing than Obama. He's you'd probably call him a Republican about 25 years ago. And he's anti-choice. So he's actually, and the interesting thing was, a lot of the other candidates profess to be, or few of them profess to be for free healthcare. Not all of them. Like Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris sort of indicated she's for free healthcare. And I'm going to say what I think about her shortly. But anyway, Joe Biden, he looked like he was a bit lost. I mean, he really did. To me, at times he looked like he was out of his depth. It was almost as if he was somebody who'd been kept behind in a class and was very slow at picking up that even though that whole party is a corporate neoliberal party, corporate-owned neoliberal party, they've been pretending to be like Bernie Sanders. They're like poor versions of Bernie Sanders, or they're lying and pretending to be Bernie Sanders, like I believe Kamala Harris is doing. So, they basically realize that people actually, the public, want the sort of things that Bernie Sanders is saying is a right, like healthcare is a right, and yes, it is. Free healthcare is a right. And so they've all caught on that, the public want this. And so they're either pretending, some of them are pretending to be like him, or sort of like taking little leaves out of his book, like, sort of Elizabeth Warren. So anyway, Joe Biden is kind of like, he looked very dithery to me, and he, and when, of course, I'm not going to go into the whole interchange he had with Kamala Harris, but Kamala Harris went for him about his supporting a segregationist way back, and she really impaled him with that. Like, I mean, I think it's pretty much over for him. Really, I saw, you saw blood on the floor with that interchange. So I think, I don't know, if he keeps going, it's because the Democratic Party have got him. The Democratic Party have got him on life support, basically, and are desperately wanting a right-wing kind of neoliberal or neoconservative, whatever you want to call him, really, in the White House. So, but she really did it for. She actually, even though I believe she's Obama 2.0. I believe she's saying she's even saying more kind of. If you followed Kamala Harris on Twitter, you would think she was some real lefty, basically, except she doesn't say anything about imperialist wars. She's totally an imperialist. You can tell she never ever has a problem. And she was also doing the whole Russiagate thing, I think, and anti-Chinese propaganda stuff. So, she's totally, that she'll be, the national security state will love her. And she'll be on board with all the various wars. It'll be like, yes, indeed. Yes, let's do that. Yes, I agree with you. She'll be totally on board with that. So she's like Obama 2.0. She'll be smooth. She'll say, if she was POTUS, she would say all the right things. People wouldn't pay any attention because, like Obama, sort of smooth and friendly and attractive looking, and they'll probably everybody will go to sleep if Kamala Harris got into office. Because she'll be doing all this crazy stuff behind, like going on with the wars, maybe even starting a new one with Iran, or China, or going after China or whatever. She'll just it'll just all like seamlessly, it'll be like just with Trump, it'll seamlessly go on Obama, seamlessly to Trump, seamlessly to Kamala Harris. That's what will happen. And of course, nothing will happen about the $10 million worth of military aid that goes to Israel every day. 10.5 million, that won't change. So they'll be very happy with her if she gets through. And she looked like, and of course with all those, yes, I want free healthcare and all this kind of stuff, which I don't believe will happen if she got through. Obama had the opportunity. He didn't. He had the opportunity in the beginning of his presidency to do free healthcare, and he chose not to. And he was totally his cabinet was basically selected by Citigroup, I think. So anyway, he was, and she's going to be just like that. And she's no friend of black people, even though she sort of goes on about being black when it came to that whole segregationist thing. She's no friend of black people. Anyway, so Joe Biden, I think, was impaled by Kamala Harris, and I'd say I would consider him sort of dead in the water, basically. But he'll probably keep on going because they want somebody like that, somebody who's obviously not for free healthcare and stuff. But anyway, Kamala Harris came out looking very strong in that. And like I say, this is all just show. This is all just a dog and pony thing, just a circus. It's all just, a carnival, and really, it doesn't really mean anything. And what people say, you can take with a grain of salt. They'd say anything. They're so desperate to be the president of the United States. It's sort of really sad to watch, how desperate these people are. They're like somebody who desperately wants to go out on a date with someone, and just basically would say anything and do anything to go out on a date with that person. That's sort of how I feel about that group, except for, say, Bernie Sanders I've said that I have problems with Bernie Sanders. I think he's an imperialist, and he's for drone programs and all that kind of stuff. I have a problem with him. He's all over the place with that and all of that. But whatever. He was the only one really that I actually believe wants free healthcare. And if you want to know, like, unfortunately, and this is probably something a lot of people don't realize if they don't understand the operational reality of a sovereign economy, which is what MMT is. It's a description of that. That Bernie Sanders, even though he has Stephanie Kelton as a economic advisor, he still puts out this notion, and he knows better. He absolutely knows better. It's Rudy. Hey. He definitely knows that federal taxes don't fund spending, and yet he keeps putting out this thing that he said he knows how to pay for it because he's done all the calculations, and he knows how to pay for the free healthcare and all that sort of thing. But he sort of makes out like you have to tax something to be able to pay for those things. But he knows that's not true. But he seems to think that people need to keep hearing that economically illiterate thing because they're used to hearing it. Everybody thinks that federal taxes fund these things. You often hear people say, "Oh, there goes my taxes paying for more military stuff, paying for these wars." Actually, no, federal taxes do not pay for those wars. And that's why you need to look into Learn MMT and check out Real Progressives on Facebook. That's at Real Progressive, singular, on Facebook. Or check out Stephanie Kelton, who is Bernie Sanders' economic advisor for 2016 and 2020. And she's a big proponent of MMT because she knows how the sovereign economy works. She knows that it's a currency issuer, and when you want to fund the things like free healthcare, you don't need the federal taxes. The only constraints are resources. So, she knows all about it. I'm not going to try and explain it. I'm not very good at explaining that, but I have a basic understanding of it, and I know what is false and what is not when it comes to that sort of thing. And I know that a sovereign economy can afford free healthcare right now. It's just that they choose not to. It's not because they can't afford it, and a government budget is not like a household budget. So anyway, check out MMT, Learn MMT, which is simply a description of the operational reality of a sovereign economy. Check out those people, that person I mentioned, and check out Real Progressives. And there's a bunch of other people that you can find out about through Real Progressives. So check that out. So anyway, it frustrates me when I hear Bernie Sanders saying, I've worked out how we can pay for free healthcare. I've sorted out some taxes, and that's going to, it's totally funded, because that's just not how it is. So just so you don't think that I'm speaking through my hat, please check out that Stephanie Kelton. You can find her also on stephaniekelton.com. Okay, so that's unfortunate. So Bernie Sanders and sadly Tulsi Gabbard doesn't really understand MMT yet, and so she just sort of says the same kind of thing. But Bernie Sanders knows better. Anyway, so Bernie Sanders actually I thought he did quite well at getting his points across, even though I sort of thought they were favouring other candidates, and but that's what they're going to do. They're going to try and I feel like that's why they put so many candidates in there, so that it took time away from him, but also to make it look like he's not a standout candidate, so that all these different candidates are all sort of saying similar kinds of things or pretending to be for this and that he is for, and yet they're probably not. They're not going to do that. They're going to make some excuse if they become president, or whatever. They're going to blame the GOP or whatever for not being okay with it, or whatever the hell. But they're not. They're trying to make out as if other people, like Kamala Harris, she's pretending to be like him, and so is Elizabeth Warren. They're trying to pretend to be like him on a lot of different things. But, this is sort of dirty politics, really. And it must be frustrating for him to know that they're just really lying, and that if they got in, these things would never happen. And I do believe that he really does care about people. I don't think that he is. I don't think he's being disingenuous and pretending to care. I really do think he has a long history of different things. Like I say, I'm not. I think he's an imperialist, but I do think he has a long history. He cares about people, and I think that he really wants those things. So, it must be very difficult to witness other people on stage pretending to want these things, pretending to care about the public, when their past actions are the best predictors of their future behavior, and it does not bode well for any of those people to do what they claim they want. And some of them, of course, are just complete. They're not remotely even pretending to be either. And the other thing that sort of, I think they did another one about, who's, I don't know if they said who's the greatest threat. I tried to find a video so I could play some little bits so I could then sort of talk about it, but I have to do this from memory. And one of the things, I think they either said they all agreed, a lot of them agreed that China was a problem, and if it wasn't China, it was Russia. And Bernie Sanders didn't say that. He said, what did he say? Something that was quite broad and powerful. I can't remember exactly what he said to that, but anyway, all the others were all signed up to the National Security State Imperialist Club, and they all indicated their credentials were very clear that they were going to be totally yes people, sycophants to the national security state, and get on board with all their imperialist wars. And that's what that told me when most people said they were concerned about China and thought that was a national security issue, that to be, something to be a threat, a big threat. And there didn't seem to be any real discussion about war. They didn't even bring that up, which I find is absolutely amazing and just shows how normalized it is and how acceptable it is. Bernie Sanders, I think, said something about, avoiding a war with Iran, and that's very good. That's the thing that I look for, and you just know that if they're okay with all the imperialist stuff that's been going on so far, by sort of answers like China is the biggest threat and Russia and all of that, then you know that things are just going to go on unabated. The normalized war is just going to go on unabated. Many, many more people are going to die. Many more soldiers are going to kill themselves or be killed. And many more veterans will be homeless. Many more countries will be destroyed, and so forth. And of course that tells you too that they are much more interested in that than they are with the climate emergency. So that's really all I can remember about it. Andrew Yang, he's somebody who promotes a universal basic income. And I invite you to check out the MMT resources that I mentioned, because a universal basic income is a neoliberal scam. And you can find out why that is through those resources that I mentioned. And what people should be wanting is a federal job guarantee. And I don't think Bernie Sanders would promote a UBI. I think he would be on board with a federal job guarantee, as his economic advisor Stephanie Kelton is. So don't support a UBI. It is a trap, and a neoliberal trap, and that's why so many oligarchs think it's a good idea. That's why he's invited to be on MSNBC and all those different programs, because they're okay with it, because it is a neoliberal scam. So you know when something is probably a problem when you're getting a person being invited to all these mainstream media programs to talk about that. So just remember that about a universal basic income. Just remember it's a neoliberal scam, and that a federal job guarantee is much better. And it's not slave labor, and no, it's not forcing people to work if they don't want to work, but it's actually very, very important, and it would be very beneficial. So learn MMT. Okay, so that's what I think about Andrew Yang, and he's an imperialist too. Like, he thinks Russia is a threat. He promotes anti-Russian, he promotes anti-Chinese propaganda. So he's a big tosser, and all these other people are big tossers too, basically. I've said what I think about Harris. I don't even think these other people are even worth mentioning. I don't think they'll be around for long. And I meant to say about O'Rourke, Beto O'Rourke, that he is totally on board with the imperialist agenda, the CIA talking points, totally. So if he ever got in even as a vice president or whatever, he would be totally, totally on board with everything they wanted him to do. So just remember that, because he was totally anti-Russian propaganda, the whole shebang. That's Beto O'Rourke for you. And he's married, I think, to somebody incredibly rich, and he's pretending to be some sort of man of the people, rolling up his sleeves and speaking Spanish and all this sort of nonsense. He's calling himself Beto even. I mean, what is he, Irish, O'Rourke? I mean, seriously. So anyway, speaking Spanish and pretending to be sort of all with it, with the with the Latinos and stuff. That's what I mean when I say speaking Spanish. I mean, he's speaking Spanish. He's pretending to be all there with the Latinos, and just this whole, this something that drives me really crazy about these people, these candidates, is they always they do these little personal stories, trying to tug at heartstrings, like Joe Biden using people in his family, the tragedies that he's had in his family, and yes, they were awful, but using them to sort of further his political career. That's what he was doing, and so were some of the others. I mean, it's kind of awful, seeing them dragging out their dead wives and dead children and stuff, and it's sort of using it to tug at people's heartstrings so that that gives them somehow more credibility. That's what Joe Biden was doing. But basically, he looked like a deer in the headlights. I hate to use that metaphor, but being vegan and everything. But he looked like a dithery sort of. He looked a bit lost and out of his depth. Anyway, that's my feeling about it, and people may disagree. I don't live in the United States, thank goodness. I have to say thank goodness, because wow, we have enough problems with our politicians here. I mean, they're getting worse and worse. The bar's getting lower for the quality of people we have over here. But at least we have preferential voting, so we have choices. Even though we had a terrible outcome in the most recent federal election, I don't know what the hell happened. Well, I do know some of the things why that happened, but at least we have preferential voting, ranked choice voting. So it's not sewn up. We just don't have two parties and that's it, and there's no hope for anybody else. I mean, where is the Green Party? I don't even know what they're doing right now. Well, if somebody could tell me are they even going to get run for this election? I don't even know what they're doing. It's obvious that Jill Stein isn't running. So I think Howie, somebody else, he was on Chris Hedges. I think he might be running. I know. Where are they? I don't know what they're doing. Anyway, so, and by the way, the Green Party totally refuses to understand MMT. I'm talking about now the gatekeepers of the party. There is, I think, is it Nebraska or Nevada? The Green Party in Nebraska or Nevada is sort of, some of the people there are totally on board. And there are some people in the Green Party understand what it is, but they're totally resistant. And if you're resistant to understanding the operational reality of a sovereign economy and how to answer the question, how are you going to pay for it? If you cannot answer that question in a real way, then where are you? This is the problem with people rejecting something that they don't even understand and saying, I don't want to know about it, and which is some of the gatekeepers in the Green Party have refused to understand. MMT is not something that's invented. It's just a description of what exists right now and what is in use right now, except that we've been told these economically illiterate things about the economy, and this is actually keeping us in some ways in prison. And it's the same thing here in Australia. We get politicians likening the government budget to a household budget and saying that they need to bring the deficit into a surplus. They need to balance the budget. When you do that, you actually take money away from the public, you take money away from them, and it's actually a disaster. And usually it's followed by a recession. That's what happens when people put budgets into surplus. It's a really dangerous thing. And if people understand MMT, which is not a theory, it's not something that needs to be implemented, it's something that exists right now, that politicians use right now. They fund, various things from a monetarily sovereign government, from a monetarily sovereign economy. And that's what they're doing right now to fund the military. And it's not an either-or thing. And you don't have to tax the rich to afford free healthcare and all of that. You don't have to tax anybody to afford those things. So please look into that. We get this nonsense here in Australia. And it's really frustrating. Sometimes I attend some political things and I hear people saying, oh, we have to get this budget into surplus. And I think, oh my God, it's just never ending. Listening to that, it's scary. And that's what this government we have at the moment said. And what that means is they just take money away from us, take money away from the public. That's what that is. Social programs and all sorts of things. Basically, what I feel about these two Democratic debates is they're a shit show, basically, and it's really awful. It's really awful seeing how they're just a whole lot of phonies pretending to be being poor versions of Bernie Sanders, and that they're not really going to come through with that if they ever got in, and that includes Kamala Harris, Obama 2.0. You just know that, and it's awful to see people that are more desperate for power than they are for actually helping suffering and dying people. Suffering people and people who are killing themselves in the country, in the United States, because they cannot handle the poverty or the social inequality and all of that. And that's awful to think that those people are more interested in power than actually helping people. It's just disgusting. And that's the thing about power. You end up getting people attracted to it that really aren't very good. And of course, not to mention, equally as important, or more important really, are people that have nothing to do with the United States, who are just trying to live their lives and have these imperialist wars thrust upon them, and their country's destroyed, their families murdered, they're raped, and everything is pillaged and stolen, and then their country is overtaken by mafia-type corporations, and that's how it goes. That's how that's how the U.S. empire rolls. And so all these countries, Middle Eastern countries and elsewhere in Venezuela and all those different countries, are constantly being threatened or attacked or whatever. And Iran is next on the list. And that could be a disaster. That could be an absolute disaster. And as I've said before, and as other commentators have said before, that the Russiagate thing is probably handed Donald Trump the next election. And if they keep Joe Biden, they've handed Donald Trump the next election. They have half a chance. If they have Bernie Sanders, because he would be able to run circles around Donald Trump. But look at Biden today. What a disaster. Kamala Harris, maybe, but she's going to be Obama 2.0. I actually think that Donald Trump is going to get in 2020. That's what I think. If they don't have Bernie Sanders, it's finished. If they don't have Tulsi Gabbard, it's finished. Either one. That's probably it. And if I've said before, if Donald Trump gets in, he'll see that as a mandate, and it'll just, everything that he's doing right now, it'll be in overdrive. And not that the Democratic Party was ever going to do anything meaningful about the climate crisis, but Donald Trump definitely isn't, and he's actually going the other way and undoing everything. So that's, and that is probably the most important issue, the climate emergency. And everybody, I don't even know why people were talking about a lot of these other things, because the climate emergency is, imminent extinction is on the horizon, and everybody in the world should be focused on that, but we're not. Game over. Anyway, so thanks so much for watching. My name is Trish Roberts. Please click the subscribe button. If you like the content, please click the notifications bell. Otherwise, you don't receive the updates. Click the like button if you like the content. And as always, please leave comments. I have no problems with people disagreeing with me as long as you're civil. So thanks so much for watching. Till next time. Bye for now.